Hey everybody, this is Andre here with the Kevin Breeze channel, and in this video, we're going to be doing a comparison between the Motorola Moto G Play and the Apple iPhone 12. Let's get started. So the Moto G Play has a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 80.6%. We got a water drop notch here for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 5 megapixels. I'm not a huge fan of the water drop notch, but it does look okay for this phone, considering that the large display and relatively thin bezels do make up for it. But still, in general, the water drop notch doesn't really give the phone a clean look. The iPhone 12 has a 6.1-inch OLED display with a resolution of 1170 by 2532, a PPI of 460, an aspect ratio of 19.5:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 86%. For the front-facing camera here, this camera is 12 megapixels, and you can see it right in here on this notch here. Now, even though the notch for the iPhone is a lot bigger, I do like it a little bit better than the water drop notch on the Moto G Play, because the notch on the iPhone does look like it really belongs on the phone, and it makes a lot more sense than this random little blob on the screen. I do think that overall a hole punch front-facing camera does look a lot better than either of these, but in general I do like the display of the iPhone better. That being said, the iPhone has a much higher quality display as well. With an OLED versus an IPS LCD, the colors are going to look a lot better, and it has a higher resolution and PPI, so overall you're just going to get a better experience as far as that goes. Now on the other hand, the Moto G Play has a much larger display, so if you're doing something like reading, you would benefit from a larger display. So it really comes down to personal preference and which one is more important to you, size versus quality. Now the Moto G Play is getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, whereas the iPhone 12 is getting 64 gigabytes of internal storage, and you can't use a microSD card on an iPhone 12. I would say even though the Moto G Play can use a microSD card, I would still give the advantage to the iPhone because it's not a little difference. The iPhone 12 has double the internal storage of the Moto G Play, and the reason I favor internal storage over microSD card expansion is because with internal storage, you can get more apps, whereas you can't have apps run from a microSD card. Plus, at this level, a microSD card is going to be more of a hassle. So overall, I would say the iPhone 12 has an advantage here. 32 gigabytes just is not cutting it, especially with the data that an Android phone takes up for its system. The system alone is going to take up almost half, if not actually half, of the storage anyway, and you're going to have such little room for anything else. So I would say that 64 gigabytes is a minimum, and unfortunately, the Moto G Play has half of that minimum. Now there's no wireless charging with the Moto G Play, but the iPhone 12 does have wireless charging, so if you like that feature, that's something to keep in mind. Both of these phones have Face Unlock, but the Moto G Play also has a fingerprint scanner, which really does come in handy. Unfortunately, the iPhone 12 doesn't have one. So as far as options to unlock your phone, the Moto G Play definitely has a convenience advantage. We're going to test out this fingerprint scanner real quick and see how it performs. The scanner is located right here on the back, really easy to reach, really convenient to use. There we go, one more time. As you can see there, it's really fast and responsive. No complaints about this. It's really nice that it has one since the iPhone 12 doesn't. Now looking at these camera setups, the Moto G Play has a 13 megapixel rear camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. And the iPhone 12 has a 12 megapixel rear camera and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now the depth sensing camera is really just for portrait mode, and the iPhone 12 most likely has these two functions combined into one camera. So feature wise, unfortunately, the Moto G Play doesn't have an ultra-wide camera, but at least the iPhone does, so it's going to have an advantage there. Now, these are pictures taken by the rear cameras of both these phones. I do think they both look really nice. I was pleasantly surprised about the quality of the photo taken by the Moto G Play. I wouldn't think that such a featureless camera would actually be able to take such good pictures, but it did surprise me in a good way, and the picture is really nice. The details are good and the colors are well balanced, but compared to the iPhone, it still isn't quite as good. I would say for anything beyond social media, I would give the advantage to the iPhone 12 because the iPhone 12 is going to have quality that's noticeably better on places like websites and that sort of thing. And although I don't know a whole lot about photography, I do know that there are some people who do serious photography with iPhones. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I know that it is a thing, and I don't think you'd be able to do that with the Moto G Play. Now, these are the front-facing camera pictures. Here, you can definitely see a bigger difference. The image on the Moto G Play is quite a bit darker than the image taken from the iPhone. The shadows are more well placed on the iPhone, whereas with the Moto G Play, they're kind of overwhelming. It's almost like the whole picture was a shadow, and the picture was taken in the exact same lighting. So I do think the iPhone 12 in general has a much better camera. As far as video goes, the Moto G Play can shoot in qualities up to 1080p in both the rear and front camera, and the iPhone 12 can shoot 4K videos at 60 frames per second in the rear and front camera. So again, with video, the iPhone is going to be better. Now internally, the Moto G Play is getting 3GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 460 processor. We ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 219 and a multi-core score of 1058. So really not the greatest, but also not bad either. You're going to be able to do a lot of things with this, from content consumption to web browsing to social media, even a little bit of gaming and photo editing, but I wouldn't push it too far because this processor, even though it's not super weak, is still a little bit on the lower side. So it might have trouble with things that have graphics or something like video editing that takes a decent amount of processing power. The iPhone 12 is getting 4GB of RAM with the Apple A14 Bionic processor. We ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone as well, and it came back with a single core score of 1591 and a multi-core score of 4089. So this phone is much more powerful. In fact, it's among the most powerful phones on the market right now. So if you're doing more high-end activities like video editing and lots of gaming, especially games with really intense graphics, you're going to benefit from using the iPhone 12 because this phone has an insane amount of processing power. Its single core score is even considerably higher than the Moto G Play's multi-core score. So you can definitely tell that the processing power is there, but at the same time, if you're only using your phone for basic activities like web browsing and a little bit of social media and content consumption and using the camera, then you might not actually get the full use out of this phone because honestly, this phone is designed for more high-end activities. Now, as far as the battery goes, there is a huge difference here. The Moto G Play has a 5000 milliamp hour battery, which is pretty much the biggest battery you can get at this point. And the iPhone 12 has a 2815 milliamp hour battery, which is considerably smaller. Not even a question, the Moto G Play has a much better battery. It's going to get not only more life per charge, but also over time as the battery degrades, it's going to be less noticeable. This is something to keep in mind if you're in a situation where you can't always plug your phone in, but still have to use it a lot throughout the day. The Moto G Play is going to hold up a lot better to that, whereas the iPhone 12 is most likely going to be pretty much done by the end of the day. Now, in conclusion, which of these devices is actually better? In almost every area, the iPhone 12 does have an advantage. The only two advantages the Moto G Play really has over the iPhone 12 are the battery and the fact that it has a fingerprint scanner. And if you like a larger phone, then the display is a little bit bigger. But at the same time, the iPhone 12 has a much higher quality display and it even has more storage. It has a much better camera. And of course, as you saw, the processor is many times more powerful. So it really comes down to what you're using your device for. If you're just using your phone for basic activities and don't have need for much more, then the Moto G Play is definitely going to be fine for you. If you're using your phone for professional purposes but don't quite want to go to the level of the iPhone 12, that's where there's a little bit of a gray area where you might want to look at another device that's between these two. For example, the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2021 has a really similar interface to the Moto G Play, of course, since they're both Motorola phones made this year, but it has a lot more processing power. In fact, it has about as much processing power as the Samsung Galaxy Note 8, which was one of the fastest flagship phones in its era, and it has a much better camera with a lot more features, and potentially most importantly, it has a lot more storage as well, and storage is a big weak spot for the Moto G Play. 32 gigabytes is really nothing these days, whereas the iPhone 12 has double that. But with the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2021, that phone is going to have much more storage, and none of this comes with the price tag of the iPhone 12. So if you want to do more than the Moto G Play does, but don't quite need all the features of the iPhone 12, something like that might be a good option for you. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, definitely leave a thumbs up and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.